Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webcast on the AWS Certified Security Specialty Certification, what it is, and how to get certified. My name is Jeff, and I'll be moderating the session today. With that, let's introduce Keytron, or I guess welcome him back. We've been doing a whole series of webinars. We have 5 of them on the AWS Cert, so glad to have you back again, Keytron.
Thanks, Jeff. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So yeah, as I mentioned, the plan today, we're going to just cover, what this cert is. There's multiple certs in the AWS ecosystem, so I want to make sure you know where this kind of fits into your career path. Then we'll talk a little bit about the AWS security job market, salary, career path, that kind of stuff. But the bulk of the presentation, just want to cover, let you know what is on the exam, what you're expected to know, what's good, all that good stuff. And then we'll talk just a little bit about the different training options if you're interested in training for that certification. So with that, let's kick it off, and I'll throw it over to you, Keytron, to talk just a little bit about what the cert is and where it fits with the other AWS certs.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Jeff. So the security specialization, as the name kind of alludes to there, it's a specialization, and it's one of the advanced AWS certifications. So what it is it focuses on just security, but kind of the pre-required knowledge or the prereq knowledge is that you understand the basics and to some extent the operational aspects of how AWS actually works. And for that reason, you'll see most folks in most places recommend that you have went through AWS Solutions Architect or Solutions Architect Associate at a minimal to start really getting yourself prepared for the hands-on and the stuff that's required for you to be able to pass the certification. Now, this is one of the Amazon certifications, and there are several others, but this is one of the ones that you absolutely must get some hands-on to be able to pass the exam. No matter what test engines you use to practice, you got to get into the environment and get some hands-on to really be able to sit comfortably and pass this exam. So it really focuses on getting you up to speed on everything security related to Amazon. This includes identity and access management, data security classifications, protection mechanisms, encryption, a lot of things that we already know about when we look at a traditional environment. How do we do those same things in cloud? And there are some of these learning objectives that you'll find that it kind of reinforces, but there are some new objectives as well, as far as, just really getting an idea of what multi-tenant cloud looks like and how customer segmentation actually works, and really learning and adopting that shared security responsibility that you have when you migrate to cloud. That's one of the biggest and kind of, to me, one of the undersold objectives and things that you have to kind of start to understand. What is your responsibility in, and where does Amazon's responsibility start when you're building out security? So this certification gives you the knowledge and prepares you for understanding and actually executing on those types of things.
Yeah, let's talk just a little bit about some of the numbers here in the job market. As we mentioned on our previous webinar, AWS began offering certifications more than a decade ago, back in 2013. This certification was created about 6 years ago in 2018, and it was actually just updated pretty recently, just last summer. And they added a 6th domain. We'll talk about what's on the exam on one of the upcoming slides, but it used to have 5 domains. Now they added a 6th domain, which is management and security governance. And as we also mentioned on the previous webinars, if you Google the top paying IT certifications, a lot of the Google and AWS certifications are on there. Multiple are on the top 10. This one was number 6 on the list, the Skillsoft top 20 IT certifications of the recent report that they put out. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything you want to add, any color just about like the job market, for AWS security, or anything that you see you want to add to that, Keytron?
Yeah, absolutely. So, security has been at the top of mind for most organizations and most organizations' leadership for some years now, right? This is why there's such a big movement in the world of cybersecurity and cybersecurity training. And one of the things that we as an Infosec organization have kind of been very vocal about for the last 6 or 7 years is like, look, you know, if you're not merging your security knowledge with cloud knowledge, you're going to find that you're not prepared for the job market and the industry in a few years. And I think we're approaching that point now to where that's a realization. And it's no surprise that security would be one of the top, AWS security would be one of the top certifications in the top 10. Because if you think about it, AWS kind of leads the market. Like if you look at cloud adoption organizations, they are the leader in the market as far as how many organizations are using it, revenue, and all of those things. And then if we pair that with the fact that security is still the biggest concern, which is closely being caught by AI, but right now it's still security, the biggest concern for organizations, it makes sense that it's number 6 on the list of all certifications.
All right, let's now move on. I think a lot of people on the call are wondering, of those 4 different AWS certifications we showed, which one is right for me. So we have a little bit of information here pulled from our syllabus. As I mentioned, you can find that in the related content tab if you want to, get more information on the bootcamp and who this is for. But yeah, can you talk a little bit about, what the expectation should be going into this training? I know you mentioned it's a more advanced cert, so I assume we need some kind of experience to be successful.
Yeah, I think if you're going along the cloud learning path and you've done your cloud practitioner, you've done your solutions architect or solutions architect associate, this is an ideal next step for most of those people. Maybe not some, like if your job is to do data science and machine learning and AI, then I would say machine learning might be the next best step for you if that's your area of specialty. But for a lot of folks, security would be a good next step career wise. It ties nicely to the solutions architect and solutions architect associate, because a big part of the SA exams, both professional and associate level, is security. There's a whole, we talked about this in the solutions architect associate webinar. I think it was something like 24% or so of that exam deals with identity and access management, other security things. So it is a nice tie over to move right out of that into a security specialization, because a lot of that knowledge is a continuation from what you scratch the surface on in those other certs. But one of the things I want to kind of drill in and double click on here is if you look at where it says ideal candidates, if you look at security engineers and security architects, let's be honest about it. In 5 years, most of those security engineers and security architects, you need to be able to put the word cloud in front of those titles, right? So instead of just being a security engineer, you need to be a cloud security engineer. Instead of just being a security architect, you need to be a cloud security architect. As a matter of fact, I know of several large organizations where they've actually made it mandatory. In one case, I've actually seen emails that were very specific, like, hey, if you're a network architect, you got about 2 years to become a cloud network architect, or we may not have a position for you. That type of driver to move people towards going out and getting these skills. So I think that's how we put this in context. So if you're new to AWS or you're new to solutions architects in the cloud and you're new to engineering in the cloud, this is definitely right for you as your next move. But if you are a security engineer and a security architect, it's also probably a good move for you. Now, whether or not, an existing security engineer or existing security architect should do solutions architect or solutions architect associate first, that's going to depend heavily on what your aptitude is and how much cloud experience you have. But I think if you have any of these titles, this should be something that you should lean heavily into, or if this is what your goal is.
Great. Let's take the next, maybe 10 minutes or so and talk a little bit about what's on the exam. We have a slide here covering the actual details and exam objectives. And again, you can find this full outline, with even more information in that related content tab, the AWS exam guide. And then we have some information on some of the tools as well that'll be covered on the exam. So anything stick out here? You want to maybe walk through each of the domains and talk about it?
Sure. So threat detection and incident response. Now, this is a really important one and a big one, because most organizations still, a lot of organizations have trouble with threat detection and incident response in traditional environments. So just to give you context, we're talking about environments that we've had our entire computing life to learn about, right? These environments that we've known from the ground up, we struggle with threat detection and incident response in those. So it makes sense that if we move to a completely new way of thinking about networks and building a network and architecture and routing and all of these different things, then it's a little bit more challenging because we don't have necessarily the level of control that we had in a premise environment. Because remember, if you own your own data center and you own your own physical network, you control everything from layer one, which is the physical cabling, all the way up to layer seven, which is like the applications that run everything, right? You control all of that. When you look at a cloud solution, you don't control all of that anymore. You control layers three up for the most part, and everything else you kind of have to trust your cloud vendor. All right. But where does the delineation happen? Like when you look at building a threat detection architecture or an incident response architecture, where does the delineation happen? And this is why this is an important part of the objectives, is you get a good understanding of that in this learning and in this preparation. Also, the solutions. You know, one of the things that people say is, well, when you move the cloud, you lose some of your security control. There's downsides, but there's also upsides. There are tools, capabilities, and capacities that we have to do incident response and threat detection in AWS that we simply don't have otherwise. And we can do it at a cost rate that's way cheaper in a lot of cases than we can do it otherwise. And you kind of learn about those things and how to put together those architectures. Now, security logging and monitoring, this has to do with, you know, bringing out the best of your SIEM solutions and your SOC work and some of that stuff. And one of the cool things, if you look at most big SOC software vendors and most big SIEM vendors, Splunk, QRadar, Nitro, Exabeam, whoever they may be, most of them have AWS bring your own license types of capabilities, which means if you have these SOC and SIEM solutions on a premise environment that you own, you can license some of that in the cloud without having to build something out complete from scratch as far as a licensing solution. So you learn about those things, you learn about what those solutions are, and you learn about how to integrate those better with existing and built-in AWS solutions that do some of the same things. Won't get into specifics. I'll save that for if you take the class, but there's definitely solutions, AWS solutions, as far as logging, things like CloudTrail and some of the other stuff that we have capabilities to use that just revolutionizes how we can do logging and monitoring. And I'll leave that at that. Infrastructure, kind of the same thing. We don't own the physical infrastructure anymore, so we have to rethink how we do that. And this really gets you set up to go forward and architect that really well, like well architected when you have these understandings. Identity and access management, as I said, this is a big part of the solutions architect and architect associates preparation. So this knowledge transfers nicely and you kind of pick up where you left off there. You kind of double click and dig into some of the things that you just kind of touched at level one in the other certifications. And then a really big one here, data protection. And into that, you know, if you look at, if I were to take privacy, right, I would say that it kind of sits some in data protection and some in management, security, and governance. But really, these last two, the data protection and the management and security and governance, kind of sets you up to be able to successfully deal with all of the regulation and the coming requirements around privacy and PII protection and those types of things. It really gives you the foundation that you need to build out and architect solutions that allow you to do those things securely and in a way that we can actually monitor, certify, and actually meet compliance with. So that's the value of the domain overviews here and how they tie nicely with, you know, you migrating to the cloud, or if you're already in there, how to go back and make sure you have these boxes checked.
Yeah, there's also, as Keyshawn was mentioning, a number of different AWS services and features that are covered on the exam. In fact, you could probably argue all of the AWS services and features are covered in some way because security kind of applies to everything, right? But is there anything in particular that you wanted to call out here or talk about in terms of these services and features?
Yeah, so if you look at, like I said, the solutions architects, and the associate exam, you'll see some of these topics mentioned, but you'll also see new topics here, right? Like CloudTrail is mentioned in there, CloudWatch is mentioned, of course, a VPC, which is, if you think about Amazon as being this big virtual private network, a VPC is your own little corner of that network. So within Amazon's big network, you have your own little virtual private cloud, VPC, that's your network within their network that only you have access to, right? So that is really the foundation of what an AWS solution is for most organizations. Now, of course, we can build out, app only solutions and do just software as a service type solutions, but all these things are still happening underneath. And whether you're building out an entire organization from ground up, or you're just using a SaaS solution that's inside AWS, it's important for you from a security standpoint to understand how all these pieces that you see here fit together, so that when you start having to answer those security questionnaires and you try to get SOC 2 compliant and all of these other things that we have to go through, you can talk intelligently about these things and how they work, because you're going to have to be able to do that if you're a security architect or a security engineer, or you fall within any of the roles. All these topics, I would say, are kind of equally important. So yeah, I wouldn't pick any one, but these are the kinds of things that the certification is built around.
Great. Yeah, let's now move on. Just talk maybe a little bit about the training options for these different certifications, and then we will have a few minutes left to take any questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A widget there. But yeah, obviously we have boot camps, and I know you've taught many boot camps here at Infosec for probably close to 2 decades, I would guess. Not to age you too much, but yeah, just anything you want to mention. Maybe some folks have never taken a boot camp before; they're not really sure how it works. Anything to really talk about there?
Yeah, so you do get 90-day extended access to components, including recordings. So all the lectures, all those things, like those are recorded, and you get access to that. 100% satisfaction guarantee, exam voucher, 90 days access to Skills, which is our asynchronous training platform that has AWS content in there, and we're constantly putting more. These are things that you can go and do reinforcement learning to reinforce the things that you learned in the boot camp, follow up on things. We have a full cyber range that's part of that you can go and get hands-on practicing there as well. And just some of the skills that you need hands-on to do, this package enables you to kind of do that stuff even after the course is over. For some people, it ends up being like, man, I didn't realize, how uncomfortable I was on the command line. So maybe I need to go do more command line stuff so that I can, when I see the AWS CLI, I'm not terrified when there's a task that requires that. We have the learning content in there to get you that hands-on and get you comfortable doing that. So it's just a nice add-on to the immense and very deep technical hands-on instruction that you're going to get during the boot camp. And that's kind of what we're known for, is being hands-on, skills-driven, with the certification as a bonus, right? Like you're probably gonna pass, but you're also gonna learn how to do these things. And I think that's one of the biggest value adds.
All right, we have a couple of questions that are coming in. One person's asking, how long is the boot camp? I believe this AWS one is 3 days, but I don't know if there's any other context you want to provide there.
Yeah, it's 3 days, and that's sufficient if you already have the equivalent knowledge of the AWS Solutions Architect or Solutions Architect Associate. So if you have that cert already, or you have that equivalent skill and experience, then yes, it's the 3 days is what this was designed around. So the assumption is you meet that criteria.
Awesome. Yeah, and this is a question for myself, not to put you on the spot, but I know we also have Microsoft Azure certification. So I was curious, as someone, I know you've hired people, at your company. Do you think? I was wondering if you feel one is more valuable than the other, or one's more in use. I mean, I assume AWS would probably be more in use by companies because it's the market leader. But any thought there as people are sort of coming and they're looking at the different cloud options, and they're considering like Azure or AWS?
Yeah, so what I would say to kind of dodge that on the spot space that you just put me in there, because I don't want to get beat up by Microsoft or Amazon. What I would say is, you know, get a glimpse of the technologies, get a glimpse of the places you want to work, and then research and find out what that organization uses. And most likely, you're better off going and learning that technology first. Now, what I recommend is you need to have knowledge of both. I mean, I might even say all three, including Microsoft, Amazon, and Google Cloud. We can't forget about that because that's a powerful platform as well. But I would say start with either A, what is the technology that your current organization is using? Because you're going to have some institutional knowledge and probably some access. And then B, what is the organization using that you're trying to work at, right? Like some people may not even have a job yet or may not have the job that they want. So I would say look at what's being used where you are, where you want to go. And it's probably better to start with that technology. And if that's AWS, then start with that.
Great. Yeah, I think we have two more questions here. So Brandon is asking, I think we get this question a lot in various forums. He's saying he has a bachelor's degree in cybersecurity, recently obtained an associate's in information technology, but he's still running into challenges trying to get their foot into the door, even though he's got, various levels of experience in different things. So I'm just wondering, yeah, after obtaining some of these AWS certificates, just any advice on breaking into the industry, getting that first job. I feel like that's always the big question, right? People are getting the training and then they're wondering, how do you sort of make that first step? So is there any, kind of guess common paths or certain jobs to look for or, places to network, things like that come to mind?
Yeah, definitely networking is important, but you also want to do targeted networking, right? Like look at some of the meetup groups, some of the user groups and things in your area and go to the ones that focus on technologies that you want to use or job roles that you kind of want to be doing, but also make sure you're prepared. Like, get yourself an account somewhere where you can go and practice, get hands-on. And definitely if you got a bachelor's in cybersecurity, the same advice I've been given for everybody that I've run across in the last 5 years, which is thousands of learners, that is you have to marry cloud knowledge to your security knowledge. So having that bachelor's degree in cybersecurity and having that on your resume is one thing, but adding to that certified AWS cloud security engineer or certified AWS solutions architect exponentially increases the value and the likelihood that someone's going to take a look at that resume more seriously with the security stuff added. So definitely try to add some cloud, even if it's just cloud practitioner. Try to get some cloud stuff on your resume as well. And I think you might see an uptick in interest in your resume.
Yeah, then last question, then we can wrap up. You talked a lot about, especially this cert, you need to get that hands-on experience to succeed. Obviously, we have the site ranges and stuff within the Infosec training, but for folks who want to get that hands-on experience, is it as easy as just creating an AWS account and playing around in there? Is that free? Is that paid? Like, how would you encourage people to actually, get that hands-on aspect that you're talking about?
So let me just say this. So the way that you start that is go to the AWS website and just search for AWS documentation and look at stuff on how to get started. Because when you go in and play with and build out an AWS environment, there is a way to go in and do learning for free in an actual live AWS environment. But there's things you have to be careful about. For example, when you build out a VM or a virtual machine, build out a VPC or a virtual private cloud, which is your own little network in Amazon, you can do that for free and to almost no money, but you have to make sure, for example, you pick free tier assets that you're building. If you're building a VM that's got 128 processors and 2 terabytes of RAM, obviously that's going to cost you a lot of money. But if you build a VM that's got 8 gigs of RAM or 32 gigs of RAM and 2 processors, that's going to be something that's a lot more manageable from a month-to-month cost. 3 VMs running with those capabilities probably is $10 a month, and you can even do it for less than that for pretty much free, as long as you pick free tier eligible assets and don't go crazy with the utilization. Now, within the AWS product, there is a budgeting tool and a calculation tool where if you build something, you can run it for a minute for nothing, and it'll show you what it thinks it would cost you or what the estimation is for the month if you were to continue at the rate that you're going now. And you just want to play with that until you get it down to 0 or 2 cents or something like that. So yes, I'd recommend going in and playing, but I recommend doing a lot of homework first on how to do it without incurring a lot of cost, because some of the horror stories out there are people going in, setting up an environment, not understanding how the cost structure works, turning on something like a Splunk or some type of big log ingestion thing and starting playing with simulations and end up with like a $20,000 bill in 24 hours for the services that they enable. So that's the most important thing. You can do it. Just make sure you're careful to read through some of the documentation, maybe take 30 minutes and understand how to do it for free.
Awesome. And with that, we're just about out of time, so we'll wrap up. As a reminder, we'll be continuing this webinar series the next 2 Wednesdays. We'll be talking about the Certified Cloud Operations Administrator certification, and then the Certified DevOps Engineer certification. So 2 more of these to go if you're interested in learning more about those. But just wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. Give a big thank you to Keytron for helping us with this series and sharing his expertise. And as you wrap up, a very short survey will appear. We'd greatly appreciate if you take just a moment to share your thoughts. Thanks, everyone, and we may see you next week.